Welcome to Podcast, the Business of Dentistry podcast, brought to you by Practice Plan. Podcast delivers the best business advice, real-life stories, and practical hints and tips to make your practice a more profitable and sustainable business. And now, here's your host.
Hello and welcome to this episode of Podcast. My name's Fern from Practice Plan, and today I'm really thrilled to be joined with Nicky Thackray, founder at MyZendays. Hi Nicky, thank you for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me. It's lovely to be here.
Would you just like to introduce yourself to the audience and tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do?
Yeah, sure. So, like you said, I'm the founder of MyZendays, and this is a company that I set up about 6 years ago, and it was really in response to trying to share good information, education, and inspiration and motivation, to be honest with you, for people to really start looking after their mental health and their own well-being. So predominantly my key focus areas are coaching. So I work with a lot of women, partially to do leadership coaching, also to do well-being coaching. And I teach stress management, meditation, and mindful living. All of it's really geared up to help you be able to manage stress in a really practical, day-to-day type of way, and to enjoy it so that you're not, you don't let stress dominate your life and take over and rob you of all of the joy that you could be having.
Oh, it sounds wonderful, and it's something that I'm sure everyone can relate to at one point or another. So if we just start with the sort of stress side of things then, what exactly is stress and how does it affect us?
So stress can be a bit of a beast. Like, I have to say, first off, not all stress is bad. And we'll talk a little bit about that. But stress, you would define it as being basically the adverse reaction that people have when there's excessive pressure or other types of demands that are placed on them. And so the problem that you have is when you've got too much stress over too long of a sort of period of time and it's not managed, because there's this cumulative build. So it's stress upon stress upon stress to the point where it starts to get really difficult to get your arms around it. So the key in what I teach at MyZendays is the daily habits and the weekly habits and the monthly habits of being able to alleviate stress and kind of take the weight off of yourself during the day, multiple times a day, and also, trying to kind of clean the slate so that you're not letting the stress pile up over the course of your days, your weeks, months and years, because that's when it starts to get really difficult to manage. But if you think about stress, a lot of people hear the word stress and they equate it with anxiety, and obviously unmanaged stress can lead to anxiety. So if you're not looking after your stress levels, if you're not proactively managing your stress levels, then that is a risk. But not all stress is bad. So if you think, you might be familiar with the pressure performance curve. So it's kind of this bell curve where it shows that, say, like in your professional life, if you have zero stress, okay, so if you're like on the bottom part of that performance curve, if you've got no stress, you don't feel any pressure, you can end up feeling bored, apathetic, listless, not engaged and not motivated. So having no stress at work is not necessarily a good thing, because obviously if you're someone who's a performer and you want to be engaged, you need to feel a little bit of pressure to keep you focused. And then if you think about the top of the bell curve, right at the top, that's where you want to be. That's kind of optimal stress, which is where you feel some pressure, but you can manage it. So you feel, and it stimulates things like creativity and being productive, being engaged, being focused, and being able to feel the pressure. You might be under a little bit of pressure, but it's not a problem because you know that you can do it. And then if you have a look at the sort of the other side of the bell curve, that's where there's too much stress. If there's too much stress at work, then it can lead to things like burnout, overwhelm, panic, anxiety. So you don't really want to be on either side of that pressure performance curve. You want to be at the top. So I would encourage anyone listening here to just think to yourself, where would I plot myself on that curve? And if you feel as though you're tipping into the sort of stress and overwhelm part, then start to get really active about what can you identify as the things that are really causing you so much stress that you can address proactively. Or if you're on the other side of it and you're thinking, I'm bored, I'm not engaged, I'm not motivated, I don't feel like I'm being productive, Well, so what more could you take on? What things could you do differently that's going to help put you back at the top of the curve? Does that
Brilliant.
answer
And
the question?
yeah, and that's nice to hear actually, that it's not all a negative thing, and a little bit of stress is like potentially good for us, and it's nice to hear that positive spin on it actually. So there are some obvious ways of, of how it can affect us physically and mentally, but are there any other examples, like how does stress affect people?
Well, stress can affect, it depends kind of how sensitive you are to stress and how much stress that you're dealing with. And like I said before, the problem is if you've got stress compounded on top of stress, on top of stress, on top of stress, it's very, very difficult you can do it, but it's difficult to kind of stop, dismantle it and start to manage it. So what it would feel like in terms of your body, and one of the things that's really important to think about is that there's a lot of things that stress us out. And so it's things like work pressure, pressures in your relationship, financial worries. Technology has a lot to answer for because we often feel like we need to be constantly available to everyone for everything on all the different apps and all the different, all the different bits of technology. And that itself can be really overwhelming. So there's a lot of kind of like external influences that have the impact on us. But I guess, you can't often control those. You can take measures to start to eliminate and reduce them, but you can't control all of those things. But one of the biggest causes of stress is ourselves. It's the way that we think. It's the way that we talk to ourselves a lot of the time, because we can create all of this internal pressure. And we can believe certain things about ourselves that aren't necessarily true and that are actually very debilitating. So if we have, and you might have heard of the phrase, self-talk, negative self-talk, which is that constant kind of, you didn't do that very well, they didn't think you were very good in that meeting, and all of that chipping away at your confidence. All of that has a massive effect on your overall levels of well-being and a massive impact on your stress. So whenever I'm talking about stress management, really there's 3 golden rules that I think we all need to bear in mind. And the first thing is take control. Okay, take control. So I would encourage you, if you're someone who does suffer with stress and you want to learn some ways of being able to start to manage it, the first thing is to take control. So have a look, just scan your life. Look around at your relationships, your home, your environment, your desk. Is it cluttered? How are your friendships doing? Do you get outside a lot? Do you have a lot of fun in your life? Look at all of these different aspects of your life and say, what are the bits that grab my attention that make me feel really stressed and that don't feel good? And so you might isolate, for example, finances. Okay, so you might look across all these aspects and go, I don't feel good. I feel quite stressed when it comes to my finances because I don't know what I've got coming and I don't know what I've got going out. I seem to spend a lot of money on Amazon or whatever it might be, right? So just ring fence it, and then you start to tackle the things one thing at a time. So you can make a decision to say, right, I'm going to take control, even though it's not going to feel, comfortable necessarily. But let me just spend a little bit of time, because we're clever people. We can figure it out. We just need to give it the focus and the time and the energy that it needs in order to figure it out, because it's not going to figure it out itself. And then you sit down and you have a look at it and you start to break down the problem. You break it down into small steps and say, right, okay, let me start to get really clear about what I've got coming in, about what I've got going out, about where I can curb my spending and all that sort of thing. And so this is your ability to take control. So you can often feel really stressed and you have this kind of like cloud hanging over you of like, I feel stressed when I think about money as an example. Well, you don't have to. You don't have to. You're very smart. You can figure it out. You just need to apply some of your focus and some of your energy that you're so good at applying in other aspects of your life. You see what I mean? So the first thing is take control. The second thing is breathe properly, breathe deeply. So there's so many of us, and this is what I see time and time again, people not breathing properly. They're chest breathers. So you're actually doing yourself out of all of the oxygen and the oxygenation that could happen within your body if you were to slow your breathing down and breathe deep into your diaphragm, diaphragmatic breathing, deep belly breathing. because what this does is it taps into your relaxation response, which is the opposite of the stress response. So if you're going around and you're feeling stressed and you've got a busy mind and you're worried about certain things, your breathing will reflect that. So, and you'll be conditioning yourself continually to be a sort of shallow breather, and it's doing nothing for your stress levels, and it's doing nothing for your nervous system. So even just taking 2 or 3 minutes a day, ideally at different points of the day, to just focus in, close your eyes if you want to, but you don't have to, and take some deep breaths, full belly breathing, deep belly breathing. And that will really help to bring down your heart rate, reduce your breathing rate, and start to regulate you from a kind of autonomic nervous system point of view. And then the third thing when it comes to managing your stress is to try to stay present. So the two biggest causes of stress, chronic stress, is this worry about the future. What's going to happen in the future? I can't control the future. What if this? What if that? What if the other? Which builds, and because so much of our stress is caused by the way that we think, if we're imagining all of these things happening in the future that are really stressful, it causes this stress response in your body. And the other thing that we have a tendency to do is to be obsessed with the past. So constantly reliving and rehashing things that have not felt good, relationships that went wrong, jobs that went wrong, things that have been traumas in our past. And if you relive it and you go over it again and again and again, you're effectively keeping it alive and keeping it there and very much present in your experience of today. But it's not happening today, and the future's not happening today. So the more that you can be very mindful and bring yourself back to the present when you find yourself that you've either gone flying off down a rabbit hole for the future, or that you're kind of reliving and rehashing events of the past, then the happier that you'll be.
Wonderful, yeah, some really good strategies in there, and particularly the breathing one. Like I find myself sometimes, I'm like, I forget to breathe sometimes. It's crazy. So yeah, just taking that time. Yeah.
And a lot of
wonderful.
people do. A lot of people, especially when they're stressed, or say if they're about to go into a meeting or a presentation, or even like a one-to-one with someone, they know that it's not going to be the most wonderful or relaxing experience. They tend to hold their breath. And it's just not helpful. So again, you can do the simple deep breathing exercises before you go in the shower. You can do it while you're in the shower. I often do it in the car before I set off for a journey, or before you get out the car when you've arrived at the place. Same for when you're coming home. And it's just that 2 to 3 minute little reset that really does help. It helps to regulate your nervous system, but it also helps you to just de-escalate any of the stress that you're feeling in the moment.
Brilliant. Yeah, no, I'm definitely gonna try that one. And yeah, it's nice, the strategies you talked about. It feels like empowering, that you're taking control of the stresses and not letting them rule you. You're the one that's in control. So yeah, brilliant advice there. So I suppose another aspect of well-being then is self-care, and we all hear about self-care, but what actually is it?
It's so funny, because like years ago, so before I started MyZendays, I was a typical, just like a little bunny racing around from day to day. I was at work, I was constantly busy, and I would hear a term like self-care, and I would be the one that would roll my eyeballs and be like, well, it's nice for some, and I didn't do anything for my own self-care, but I paid the price, because eventually, because I didn't have any kind of self-care practices or commitment or understanding at the time, to be honest with you, and I was too busy working, traveling, flying around, doing all of the different things, eventually I burnt out. And so when we think about self-care, think of it as self-maintenance. So think of it in terms of, if you bought a really beautiful flashy car, like your favorite sports car, you'd want to maintain it. You wouldn't just fill the tank up with fuel one day and expect it to last forever. You wouldn't just wash it once and expect it to stay clean. And at the end of the day, we're the same. It's the same for us, because as we go through our lives, we pick up this stress, like we were saying before, the stress compounds on top of stress. if you're not actively shedding it and getting rid of it and cleaning it off, imagine it's like mud on your gorgeous car. If you're not cleaning it, it's going to stain. It's going to have a lasting impact. So self-care, think of it not as an indulgence, and definitely avoid that sort of stereotype of self-care being, I'll just have a bath with a glass Prosecco and stick some cucumbers on my eyes. Do you know what I mean? And light some candles, because that's a nice part of it, and if you like doing that, I certainly do like doing that. It's a nice part of it, but it's not meaningful. It's not going to serve you in the long run. That's the point. So if you think about self-care, one of my favorite quotes about self-care is that, what was it? When you're well fed, it's easier to share the feast, right? Meaning, if I'm starving, right? I'm starving and I'm hungry, and I've got nothing really to eat. And you come along and you say, I have an apple in front of me, and you say, can I have the apple? But I'm starving and I'm hungry and I want to have the apple. I'm not going to give it to you with a happy heart at all. I'm either going to not give it to you because I just know that this is my last chance at being able to sustain myself. Or if I give it to you, I'm going to feel frustrated about it. And so if you think about that, like you can't give what you haven't got. And this has been one of the biggest learnings for me, I think, in all of my kind of 46 years of walking around on the planet. You can't give what you haven't got. So I might want to be a wonderful mother, patient and kind and fun, and I might want to be, a great wife and great to sit down and talk to and listen and everything. But if I haven't got the patience because I'm stressed, if I haven't got the time because I've absolutely stretched myself far too thin, I can't give those things. I might want to, but I haven't got them. If you wanted to borrow £1,000 from me, but I haven't physically got it, I can't give it to you. And so you need to think of self-care in terms of that, which is you can only give what you've got. So if you want to be patient, you want to be kind, you want to be compassionate, you want to have energy, you have to give yourself those things first, because they don't just land on your doorstep magically. And then the other thing to say about self-care is that a lot of people equate self-care with things like meditation, or with going to the gym and doing exercise, or eating plant-based food, And actually, I would encourage you to think of self-care from 4 different angles. So there's your kind of mental world, your psychology. Okay, so this is how healthy are your mental patterns. So what are the tapes, if you like, that you've got on repeat constantly? What are things like, what are you saying to yourself? What do you believe about yourself and your own potential? And how healthy is that? And then if you think about what you can do to become stronger and really work on, on kind of strengthening those mental patterns, it's things like learning, reading, listening to podcasts that really light you up, and that kind of thing. And then you need to think about your emotional world as well. So, because you could have a great mindset, which is I can and I will, but actually if on an emotional level, you've got a lot of trauma that you haven't dealt with, or, you've got some things that you would love to go and sit down with a therapist or a counselor or a coach or something like that and work through, you need to do it. This is about really taking accountability for yourself and to be able to get rid of the different obstacles that get in the way of you loving yourself and loving your life. So you've got to have a look at kind of from an emotional point of view, how healthy are you emotionally? Then there's the physical fitness, your body. Do you get enough sleep? Do you get enough water? Are you eating the right things? Are you not drinking too much, not drinking too much caffeine, and all that kind of thing? You have to look after your vessel. And then finally, you've got to look after your spiritual side. And everybody has a spiritual side, even though some people hear the word and go, not me, not me. But actually, everybody has a part of them, which, if you watch a sunset, for example, if you feel moved because the sunset is so beautiful, you've seen nothing like it, or if you're out in nature, or you go for a swim in the sea, that's your spiritual side, and everybody has that by virtue of being human. And so the more that you can figure out how you can connect to yourself, to nature, and to other people, and to the meaning of your life, then the happier that you'll be. So that's the thing. Really look at it at the 4 different dimensions and ask yourself, what am I doing to kind of make sure that I'm maintaining myself in all of those different aspects?
Yeah, it's so important. And I'm guessing, a lot of us, it's always not the priority, is it? We've got so much else going on in our busy days. We sort of prioritize ourselves last. So I was just going to ask, have you got any tips on how to make that a priority? Like, do you literally put it in your calendar that time to make time for yourself? Or I don't know, have you got any other ideas?
So I think you have to sell yourself first on why. You've got to sell yourself first on why. And so the best way I've found to do that is to come back to this principle of, I can't give what I haven't got. So do you like what you're giving out? Right? Do you like what you're giving out? So if you think about what kind of mum or dad or wife or husband, partner, what kind of daughter or son or friend, if you consider all those different roles that you have, how do you want people to think of you? How do you want to be remembered ultimately? But the point is, like, how do you want to impact? What kind of impact do you want to have on other people? And are you having that impact? Or is actually, in a way, you want to be patient and lovely and fun and full of energy, but you're actually knackered all the time and stressed, and you don't really open up and you don't really talk. So if you can think of what's the impact that I want to have, and then be really honest and say, is that the impact that I'm actually having at the moment? And then there'll be a gap, because we're just human, it's okay, but how do you want to then address that gap? What would be the things that would actually help you to create that outcome and that impact that you really want in all of those different roles? And so you come up with your own answers, and then so I think that's how you sell yourself on the why. And then it's about deciding, and as a coaching tip, if you're not specific about what you're going to do and when and how and whether you need any help from somebody, then you're kind of like sabotaging your own success. So if you say, for example, I know I'd be happier if I had more energy. And what does that mean? It means going for walks every day, or going to the gym, or going to that Pilates session that I fancy round the corner. Okay, so do you need anybody's help to do that? And you might think, well, I've got children at home, so I need to talk to my other half about whether they can kind of do the school drop-offs or something that's going to enable me to do it. Brilliant. Okay, so you ask for the help. And then you might say, I'm going to do it 2 times a week or 3 times a week. Brilliant. Which days and what time, which classes, and can you schedule it into your diary and let whoever know that needs to know, and that's what you're going to do. So the more that you can be clear with yourself about what the goal is specifically, what you're going to do, how you're going to do it, when you're going to do it, what help do you need to ask and from who, that's going to help to set you up for success.
Brilliant. Well, thank you so much for sharing some of those different ways of coping and managing with our stress and well-being. Just to finish off then, if there's one thing our listeners can take away from this podcast, or one piece of advice you'd say to start with straight away, what would it be?
Best bit of advice is take control where you can. So control the controllables. There's actually very little that you can control. So you can't control what's going on outside. You can't control what your kids do, what your other half does, what your boss does. You can't control those things, but you can control what you think about and what you do, right? And honestly, if you boil everything down to just that in terms of what have you got control over, it's just you. It's what you say and what you do. And so if you focus on that and you really get disciplined about how can I control myself in a better way, then everything else is less stressful.
Lovely. If anyone wants to get in touch with you, Nicky, how would they do that?
So we've got a Facebook page, MyZendays. I've got my website, myzendays.com. I've got meditation course. I've got a women's membership. And I do a lot of coaching on leadership and well-being, predominantly for women, but not exclusively for women. So you just need to get in touch, Nicky@MyZendays.com.
Brilliant. Thank you so much again, and hopefully catch up again soon. Thank you.
Okay, thanks so much. Bye.